live on Facebook. All right, Katya.
This event is being hosted by the Fridays for Future West Kootenay team, an environmental youth group inspired by Greta Thunberg, along with the Nelson West Kootenay chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby, also known as CCL, whose goal is to build political will for a livable world and to help people claim their personal and political power. We decided to host this forum because we understand that solving the climate crisis is the greatest challenge of our times. This year, all of us have seen the impacts of climate change firsthand. We've endured crop-killing drought and skies choked with wildfire smoke. Climate change impacts all aspects of our society and the natural world we depend on. We need all levels of government, organizations, businesses, and citizens to step up to help create the better future that we know is possible. This election is critical because the people we choose to represent us in Ottawa will be responsible for choices that ultimately decide whether my generation and those to come will inherit a healthy, livable planet.
Before going into the forum, we would like to go over the role that Katya and I will have as moderators. We will introduce those asking the questions, indicate which candidates is to speak, and keep the speakers on message and on time. I will be helped in this important task by our fearless timekeeper, Jay, who is starting grade 11 in Penticton. You might notice her holding up cards every once in a while to keep everyone on time. She will let you know at 30 seconds when holding up a yellow card, and then when it's time for the candidate to stop talking. So please finish your sentence and stop when that happens. And I'll start with a few quick housekeeping items. So number one is for the audience. So please keep yourself on mute. We have disabled chat so that as not to be too disruptive. We are here to listen. I also encourage everyone to put their cameras on so it can feel like we are in a room together somewhat. One advantage of Zoom is that any real troublemakers can be put on mute, or in extreme cases can be kicked out of the Zoom meeting, although I am positive this won't become necessary. Also, please stick around at the end to participate in our exit poll.
And I just have a few reminders for the candidates before we begin. We ask that everyone be polite and respectful. Hate language or personal attacks will not be tolerated. I also ask that you keep your mics on mute until you're ready to speak. Don't forget to unmute when it's your turn. Please refrain from interrupting the other candidates and wait your turn to speak. We also ask that you be respectful of the time limit and do not go over the allotted period that you have to answer each question. Finally, I ask that you keep the topic at hand.
Okay, so tonight we will have 8 questions for the candidates who have 2.5 minutes to speak on each question. We will start with each candidate giving a quick 1-minute introduction, then move on to the questions. Once we've reached the end of our event tonight, each candidate will be given 1 minute to deliver a closing statement. So now I would like to introduce the candidates. We are so grateful to have you all here tonight. And I'll introduce them all in alphabetical order. So we have Helena Conants, Ken Robertson, Richard Cannings, and Tara House. We will be rotating the order in which candidates speak throughout the questions, so each of you are given a chance to speak first and last. Just before beginning, the candidates participated in a random number generator to decide who will start. Ken will go first, followed by Richard, Tara, and Helena. You have 1 minute for an introduction. Ken.
Hello, I am Ken Robertson. I go by he and him. My spirit name is Squalux, meaning the bear cubs, born into Kamloops of the Nisqually peoples. My grandmother, Sarah Denault August, teachings of protecting our water shed is instilled to me to date and always: the land, the plants, the animals. I am your Liberal candidate of South Okanagan, West Kootenay. A Liberal government, we accelerated Canada's shift to a net zero mission to 2050 and setting mandatory targets for new vehicles to be zero emissions by 2035. Taking real action to fight climate change, including putting a price on pollution, unmuzzled Canadian scientists, and made the largest investment in science in Canadian history. Protecting our coastal communities and ecosystems with the Oceans Protecting Plan. Real action to ban harmful single-use plastics by 2021 to keep our oceans clean. Helping Canada reach its goal of conserving 25% of our lands, oceans by 2025, and creating good middle-class jobs in the green economy, along the way supporting over 1,300 public transit projects across the country to better help Canadians get around, create jobs, and cut pollutions. We have a real workable climate change plan that's clear and vetted and fully costed plan that we started in 2015. And we are accelerating our targets. Thank you, Friday for Futures, for hosting the debate, West Kootenay.
All right, thank you, Ken. And next up on our list, we have Richard.
Well, thank you all for tuning into this forum tonight, and thanks to Fridays for the Future and Citizens Climate Lobby for hosting this. I want to start by acknowledging that I'm joining you from the unceded territory of the SOWK people and the Okanagan Nation. And it's been an honor to represent South Okanagan, West Kootenay as your member of parliament for the past 6 years. And I'm very proud of what the NDP has accomplished since the last election only 2 years ago. The pandemic has exposed weaknesses in our economy and our social safety nets, but has also shown us what we can accomplish with political will and urgent action. We have to take those lessons and create a better Canada, a Canada where we listen to scientists and take bold steps to fight climate change, while we respect the rights of Indigenous people and reduce the many systemic inequalities in our society. With my colleagues in Ottawa, I pledge to build that fairer and greener Canada.
Great. Thank you, Richard. And now, Tara.
Thank you, everyone. I'm so glad we could have this event this evening. My name is Tara Howes, and I am your Green Party candidate. Katya, that was a really wonderful acknowledgement. It's really important to remember that climate justice is social justice. Presumably everyone's here tonight to actually understand what are some future actions that all of us are planning on taking. And one way to identify future behaviors is to take a look at past behaviors. Right now, we've got a conservative membership that didn't even acknowledge that climate change is real. We have Liberals that declared a national climate emergency one day and then went and bought a pipeline the next. And we have an NDP government who refused to support Green Party Paul Manley's old growth moratorium on old growth logging. And I really want you to let that sink in. Not a single NDP would support a halt on old growth. Right now, what we need are leaders in Ottawa, not whipped voices. So your call to action on September 20th is to elect a green voice that's focused on good legislation and not just towing a party line. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tara. And now, Helena.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for putting this on. It's so exciting to see so many people, young people doing this. I live in Penticton. I'm a former Penticton City Councillor. And also I coached the Penn High tennis team for many years and worked with the leadership group there. I'm also a small business coach. I'm excited to be here tonight. I want to tell you, since 2019, that our team has knocked on over 50,000 doors just to find out what it is that people need and are looking for right now and what they're feeling. One of the things they're angry about is this election happening right now. And of course, with the smoke, they are talking about climate change and the environment. We need a made in Canada solution for the environment and a made in the South Okanagan West Kootenay solution. The Conservatives have a solid plan for the environment. I'm running to give you a stronger voice in Ottawa because you deserve that. Thank you.
Thank you. And
All
thank you
right.
everyone for keeping on time. Katya.
Yeah, thank you so much for introducing yourselves. It's lovely to have you all here with us tonight. So let's get started with our first question. And just a reminder that we don't want to hear what candidates have done wrong. We want to hear your opinions on solutions. You're going to have 3 minutes to answer each question. Our first question is going to come from Dr. Lauren Galbraith from the New Kootenai organization, Doctors and Nurses for Planetary Health. And our speaker order for this question is going to be Richard, then Tara, then Helena, and then Ken. So Dr. Galbraith, we are ready for you to ask your question.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So the WHO has said that climate change is the 21st century's greatest threat to public health. This past summer, we've seen climate chaos across the globe, including at home with the heat dome, drought, and wildfires. As physicians in the Kootenays, we see the effects directly on our patients. I work as a family doctor, and I've treated patients with respiratory, heat, and mental health conditions as a result of the climate crisis. Historically, Canada has made excuses and delayed definitive action, continuing to be one of the worst polluters in the world. Like anyone using a harmful substance, the sooner we quit fossil fuels, the better it will be for our health. According to the IPCC report, we are now on a tight timeline to avoid the worst effects of climate change. This will be very difficult and will require coordinated government action. My question is what action to tackle this problem would your government take in the first 100 days of office?
All right, thank you, Lauren. And so Richard, you are up first and you're going to have 3 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Galbraith, for that great question. And it's particularly, I think it has hit home this summer, as you said, with the events here at home in southern British Columbia, where people died, over 500 people died during that heat event in late June, not July or August, but in June. This is an unprecedented, people think of the effects of fires and floods, but that heat event killed over 500 people, and it will happen again. And as Dr. Galbraith mentioned, there was an open letter from 230 health journals that said the greatest threat to public health is the continued failure of world leaders to keep global temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius, the change, and to restore nature. So what can we do? What should we do? We have to fight climate change at the global level, all those things that I'm sure we'll be talking about through the rest of this forum. But what a lot of people don't understand, and certainly what I've found in Ottawa is a lot of politicians don't understand, is that the change that we have now will be there. All we can do to fight climate change is to keep it from not getting worse. So we'll still have those fires, those floods, those heat events. So we have to, unfortunately, get into adaptation. For instance, the people that died in the Lower Mainland especially, they were poor people living in apartments without air conditioning, in heat islands in the cities without green spaces. We have to go to nature-based solutions to build those green spaces as quickly as we possibly can. Look at the mental health of people who have to remain isolated inside. Kids, adults, people of all ages can't go out during these smoke events because of their damage to their breathing. And they just have this long-term despair, anxiety that we saw during the pandemic as well. So we have to get into that adaptation piece right away. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I've just had a note from our organizers that after this question, we're going to stick to 2.5 minutes per response, that each of you are going to get 3 minutes for this question. And next up, we have Tara.
Thank you for that clarification. I was actually just going to ask that, so that's wonderful. So back to the question, what are our steps the first 100 days in office? And, you know, Richard did start to allude to some of these things, and we have to look at these deep systemic changes, and we really have to consider impacts on vulnerable populations. The first thing the Green Party would propose is developing an arm's length climate style caucus, where we would have Indigenous voices, youth, and scientists represented and speaking to and directing government. And this ensures there's that political, like I said, arm's length, where we're not going to have corporations whispering in the ears and lobbying to continue to fund things like fossil fuels. We also have to cancel all new pipeline infrastructure. This includes Trans Mountain, which I have taken the Stand Earth pledge to stand up against TMX. We also have to talk about the Coastal GasLink that's been going through. In fact, Paul Manley was the first politician to go up and visit the Wet'suwet'en territory when this first emerged a couple of years ago. When it hit the media, I should say. We need to ban fracking, which really releases methane, which is significantly higher and worse than carbon. We have over $18 billion in federal subsidies going to the fossil fuel industry. This includes $1 billion in BC alone that Premier Horgan has been investing. This includes LNG facilities and supports. We need to stop these fossil fuel subsidies. We also have to look at starting long-term divestment of public investment funds from fossil fuels. So this includes things like the Canada Pension Plan. If we're going to actually stop subsidizing, we have to stop investing in them as well. Right now, our corporations are able to just walk away from a cleanup, whether we're talking about abandoned wells or forestry impacts. And we need to increase the environmental bonds and actually ensure our corporations are paying for it, not putting it on our public tax dollars to do that. When we talk about health, there's an entire new term that's being developed, especially for young Canadians, eco-anxiety. That wasn't a term that existed even 5 years ago. This is a real issue. And, you know, it's something that CAPE, the Canadian Associations for Physicians on Environment, I hope I got that name right, Dr. Galbraith. I just remember their acronym. And, you know, they're doing some really great movements and pushing for addressing things like mental health supports. And, you know, things like suicide prevention lines are wonderful and needed, but it doesn't address the root cause when we're speaking about eco-anxiety. We need to actually take real, meaningful changes. And hopefully I've outlined enough actions for you to understand what the Green Party's plan is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tara. Next up, we have Helena.
Great, thank you, Dr. Galbraith. Canada emits 2% of the emissions of the world, but those emissions are extremely important, and we need to be the leaders in the world in the environment, in addressing in the environment. The thing is that what hasn't been happening so far is all levels of government have not been working together on this issue. This is very, very important. And I find that as a city councilor, I was city councilor for 7 years. And I find that the different levels of government say, oh, that's their jurisdiction, that's their jurisdiction. We need to all work together because on these very, very important issues. What actions do we need to take is, if you look at the Conservative platform, we have some great solid plan. Our current member of parliament has been in there for 6 years and hasn't been able to bring through anything. Don't get me wrong, he's an excellent scientist, he's smart, he's got great ideas, but he isn't able to achieve anything because of the party that he represents. So he's been given 6 years, and now we need a change. The Conservative platform includes different policies, including a low carbon savings account, bringing forward zero emission vehicles by following the BC zero emission vehicles policy. We want to end raw sewage dumping. We will directly work to bring down the waste, plastic waste in Canada, and we are also work on our water quality throughout Canada. but in the South Okanagan, West Kootenay. I plan to be a very local member of parliament. I plan to work on very local issues and these issues locally. And that will be the difference between what I will be, how I will be as take the role on as member of parliament as opposed to Richard Cannings. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Helena. And last but not least, we will give the floor over to Ken.
Yes, thank you so much. And I appreciate the question, Doctor. And, you know, going back to the actual question of the first 100 days, one thing I would definitely put in place is setting a moratorium on trees that are 250 years and older. Those are the first actions I would take, but also protecting our waterways, which were stripped away under the Harper governments. And those are the things that, as a Liberal government would do, is to not only reestablish, but set a high standard to those protections as well. Because as we know, we hold 1/5 of the world's water, and water is life. And these are the things that are part of a lot of the climate changes, is because we have to establish these things so that we can protect them for future generations to come. Not only that, I would also go back to my grandmother's teachings about the watershed that protects the plants, the trees, you know, the animals. These are all the biodiversity, and we've done that since 2015 with our record and starting that plan. And you know, it's not just to say in the 100 days, but it's also think about it in the long-term run too, because this is about phasing out oil and gas subsidies, which we are planning to do, but also accelerating our targets in regards to the Paris Accord. These are the things that I look at as short-term and long-term goals that we have established, and that we are putting forward with actual money attached to it that's been vetted, that we've had the support from Andrew Weaver, who was a former IPCC scientist. So, I mean, we have to look at the grand scale of things. And I do have an investment with it, with my children's future, as well as those other ones, as an Indigenous candidate, because I believe in the land. My grandmother always told me that this is not just who we are as identity, but the land is connected to us as Mother Earth on Turtle Island. And we all have a role to play in that as government. And I want to bring that Indigenous voice, not just to Ottawa, but bring it back here to the South Okanagan, West Kootenay, because we all have to do better. And I'm willing to work across party lines to establish that, no matter what the case and scenario, because that is our destiny together, because we are really not just having different ideology, but also that we have a plan in place that's costed and vetted, and also that it's endorsed by the Suzuki Foundation as well. So, I mean, we have to look at those things, that we really see what the plan is, but also from scientists. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Ken. And I will pass it off to Lynn, who will introduce our second question.
Okay, thanks, Katya. Our second question comes from Craig DeLong from the Kootenay Outdoor and Environmental Learning Society, also known as COLE. And the speaker order for this question will be Tara, Helena, Ken, and Richard. So Craig, unfortunately, wasn't able to make it tonight, so I will be asking the question on his behalf. So Craig writes, I represent the Kootenay Outdoor and Environmental Learning Society, and we are currently starting up a plastic recycling facility in the community. We take plastic from the community and turn it into products that are sold back in this community, thus eliminating the need for transportation and its associated carbon footprint. Local production of goods and services like power and food are part of the solution to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. What will your government do to support local organizations and to localize production of goods and services? And so, Tara, you get to open.
Thank you for that. I actually just want to take a moment to just talk quickly about whipped voices and whipped voting. And while I completely applaud Ken's idealism to end old growth logging within the Liberal government, Paul Manley put that motion forward and the Liberal government and the NDP supporters would not pass it. So I have deep faith very little faith when it comes to parties that have whipped voting as part of their party platform and embedded within that structure. But as far as Coles and the plastic recycling program goes, it is based in Rosslyn, and I'm happy to say that I am familiar with this project. It's a wonderful idea, and I really appreciate Craig's innovation in developing this. It helps close our it helps create a circular economy. And what's really neat about this circular economy is it's all about ensuring that we minimize the waste. Things will either become recycled or they will decompose. And what's really neat about this is that there's a big talk about we have to push to 100%. And that's actually not true. We actually only need to get up our circular economy to about 16 or 17%. It's about 9% right now. And of course, I would push for greater increases in the circular economy and try to make that 100%. But to reach targets, if we just basically double our circular economy through initiatives like this, we can actually meet those targets. It also then goes to support our local communities. And for those who don't know me, I am a local rural development researcher. And so addressing and focusing on local economies through cooperatives and supporting organizations that are really trying to address climate change initiatives are a core value for Green Party. We can look at eliminating and reducing massive red tape that exists through things like harmonizing tax rates throughout the country. We can also look at penalizing massive corporations that are contributing to our greenhouse gas emissions instead of just letting them get away with it. And so I am really excited, like I said, to hear that, Craig, and I'm sorry he's not here today to talk a little bit more about it. But I'm going to stop right there because I think I missed a flag on the time. I apologize.
Okay, thank you, Tara. Next up, Helena, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you. Great question. I'm all about local. As I said, I worked on my local council and worked on local businesses and groups for 7 years. I am currently working actually for Community Futures as a business coach with local businesses. We have a tough time addressing local issues and local businesses because we don't have great transportation in the South Okanagan, West Kootenay. And that's important because Greyhound left 5 years ago now, 5 years ago, and we haven't had any local bus service since. Local bus service obviously is important because that enhances, it not only do people not necessarily need to use a car as often, but they also are able to go to things like to get their groceries or to go to the doctors in transit, and extremely important in rural areas as we live in. Actually, in the NCUSP debate, the last debate we were in 2019, Richard Canning's promised to bring back Greyhound if he were to be elected member of parliament. Many of you can find that debate on YouTube, I believe. And so it will be interesting to see what his negotiations have been like with Greyhound, because it has been 5 to 6 years since they've serviced us, and we do need bus service. Local is so important, and that's why I have a job as a local business coach, and I have a local business myself and my family. And talking about plastics recycling, again, we need to focus on doing that locally, because right now most plastics are shipped in a truck to Delta. From there, they're shipped in a truck to Winnipeg. From there, they're shipped in a truck down to the United States, and they're chipped. In Penticton right now, we have a local business, a local entrepreneur, Ron Ride, who has created a chipping machine a small chipping machine that can go into different communities, and that we can chip the bottles ourselves. And then we can actually make send those chips directly to the company who will make the product. So it's ingenuity like that we need to focus on.
Okay. And I guess, thank you, Helena. And next, Ken.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the question. Even though you're not here, Greg, it is still an important question because this is one of the things that we've committed to, not just eliminating single usage, but that within our plan, re-elected Liberal government will require that all plastic packaging in Canada contains at least 50% recycling content by 2030. We accelerated the implementation of our Zero Plastic Waste Action Plan in partnership with provinces and territories to ensure Canada's action are consistent with other leading jurisdictions, continue to work with provinces and territories to ensure that its producers, non-taxpayers who are responsible for the costs of managing their plastic waste, work with the provinces and territories to implement and enforce an ambitious recycling target for plastic beverage bottles, strengthen federal procurement practices to prioritize reusable and recyclable products, and support our goal of a zero plastic waste, introducing labeling rules that prohibit the use of the chasing arrow symbol unless 8% of Canada's recycling facilities accept and have reliable end markets for these products. Also to support it and territorial producers' responsibility efforts by establishing a federal public registry and require producers to annually report the amount, type, and end-of-life management for plastics in the Canadian economy. So these are just some of the things we want, investing into new plastics, recycling innovation, so that we can cultivate and explore these new types of technology in the green economy, but also expanding that technology in the green economy with real innovation. So some of those is to create a new $100 million infrastructure and innovation fund over the next 5 years that will scale up and commercialize made in Canada technologies and solutions for the reuse and recycling of plastics, for instance, supporting international action to combat plastic pollutions. I mean, these are some of the things as a right to repair your home appliances so that we have a longer usage of our appliances that use plastic parts to support them so that they actually last longer, so that we don't have to keep rebuying in that. But also tackling food waste as well, because that's part of the problem as well when it comes to actual real change in tackling plastic pollutions and building a circular economy. So I want to just say thank you for the question. Have a good day.
Thank you, Ken. And now, Richard, you have the floor.
Well, thank you. And this is a great question because I think community and local action is so important to all the actions to protect our environment, climate action. It's so important to have that strong community, local base to it. One of the important things that hasn't been mentioned, so I'll jump in on that, is community power projects. You know, we have communities in the southern British Columbia that have their own electric utilities. Nelson and Penticton are examples where we could, you know, really do a lot by creating. We need smarter grids. We need to incentivize people who want to put solar panels on their homes to sell back into the grid so that we have a more distributed production energy generation that saves on energy because it's not lost in the transmission. And we're going to see more and more of this as time goes on. We need to accelerate that so that people are really incentivized to produce electricity locally so we can have more control over our energy production locally. And the NDP will support these community-owned and operated energy projects. It's one of the things that we feel is very important. Talking about plastics, my colleague Nathan Cullen had a private member's bill in the previous parliament to reduce the problem of most of the plastics we recycle don't get recycled. And there's all sorts of barriers to that. And this, his bill would have solved many of those barriers. Once or twice a year, I talk to the plastics industry, and they are all behind this too. And in 20 seconds, because Tara has already brought it up twice, I'm going to defend myself about Paul Manley's motion, which was tabled. It was never spoken to in the House. We had no opportunity to support it or not. So that's the case there.
All right.
All right.
Thank you,
you.
Richard.
Yeah, Katya, take it away.
All right. So we are going to move on to our third question, which comes from Tracy Davis, who is with Okanagan Climate Hub. And for this question, our speaker order is going to go Helena, Ken, Richard, and then Tara. So Tracy, ask away.
Thank you, Katya. Good evening, everybody. So the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that the planet is on red alert to keep climate warming under 1.5 degrees. This year, BC experienced a severe heat drought, wildfires, smoke, lost 2 towns and hundreds of lives. Canada has yet to meet its goals. So our question for you is, how would you accelerate the reduction of emissions, which this emergency requires?
Thank you, Tracy. So Helena, I'd like you to start us off, please.
Sure, thank you. Great question. I would love to accelerate those goals. But as many of you know, all of us have been through a very difficult year and a half. In fact, it's probably been one of the most difficult times in the history of our country, or at least in our generation. We have to acknowledge that something very large and very difficult has happened to all of us. I still have acquaintances that can't leave their home because they're afraid right now after a year and a half. We have a severe mental health crisis going on. We need to address that within the South Okanagan West Kootenay and our country, but within the South Okanagan West Kootenay, that needs to be a priority. Young people are calling the suicide hotline way more than they used to. And those of you who know me know that I have very close people to me that have taken their lives, and this is going to be a priority for me. There is also a serious economic crisis going on. We have the worst economy in the G7 per capita. This is something that could crash in. The interest rates go up and businesses could fold. People could lose their homes. So yes, we need to address this climate crisis, but we cannot accelerate it right now. What we need to do is take steps, find out where we are in our economic recovery. Because again, there are businesses that may not be around next year in all of our homes, all of our communities that are watching here. Wherever you're coming from, there will be businesses that cannot open up within the next few months. They've already had such difficulty getting through the summer. So yes, we will be focusing, and I will be focusing on climate, and I'll need all of your help to do it. But we will be focusing on some very serious local issues first.
All right, thank you, Helena. Next up is Ken. So Ken, please give your response to Tracy's question.
Yes, I will acknowledge your question, first of all, and that to be as truthful and honest, this is where I'm at in a sense. Of course, I pray for those that put tobacco down as soon as we lost the 2 towns. I've been through Lytton many times, but just to give you in a nutshell that, a re-elected government, Liberal government, will train 1,000 new community-based firefighters to ensure that we're ready for future fire seasons, work with provinces and territories to provide firefighters with the equipment they need to fight fires and stay safe, like Canadian-made planes, to increase provincial aerial firefighting capacity, but also support and expand Indigenous-led fire crews and build capacity to incorporate Indigenous traditional knowledge strategies in fire management. Because my grandmother, every spring, for instance, just after spring, we'd have control fires around our reserves, because we knew, even time memorial before, those teachings were embedded with us about fire prevention around our communities, so that we can actually not have them come near our loved ones and our homes. So those are the types of one prong that I see, but also having a climate ready infrastructure so that we can start investment, creating open access climate toolkits to help infrastructure owners and develop projects that ensure Canada is on the path to a net zero emission and resilient future. Building on other existing climate lenses required for federally funded infrastructure projects. These toolkits will offer resiliency assessment methodologies, opportunities for incorporating low carbon technologies and building materials and carbon emissions calculated guidelines. But those are just some of the things that we just wanted to start with, but we have started with previously, and that we did take action when it came to our record, when we started to not just unmuzzle scientists, for instance. We took it bolder, investing into science, because it's evidence-based, and that it is, I believe in climate change, I can tell you that. And it is real, and it's here now. But at the same time, we all have a role to play, and I will fight for South Okanagan, West Kootenay. Thank you for your question.
Thank you very much, Ken. And over to Richard next.
Well, thanks, Tracy. And I believe the question was about how we have to accelerate our actions to fight climate change. And we've been kicking the can down the road for the past 30 years. I remember talking about this in the 1990s. And here we have a government who has the Liberal government has seen our emissions go up every year for the last 7 years. We have a Conservative Party who wants to run on the old Harper targets. We have to be much bolder. We need to electrify our energy systems, particularly in transportation and heating. We have to clean those electrical grids. We have to be net zero in our electricity by 2030 and fully non-emitting by 2040. We have to spur the use of renewable energy, develop storage capacity to use those renewables, develop interties between the provinces so that provinces like British Columbia and Manitoba and Quebec can provide energy, clean energy to the other provinces. We have to use smart grids and distributed generation, as I mentioned before, community owned and operated clean energy, retrofits of all sizes. Transportation is one of the big ones. We need incentives for EVs, better incentives. We have to manufacture those electric vehicles in Canada, provide the EV infrastructure. And for heavy transport, heavy industry, even flight, we have to use something like hydrogen. But to do that, we have to build hydrogen infrastructure. For all this, we need rare metals and minerals. Canada has a world advantage in rare metals and minerals. We just have to have a federal government that provides the funding and the supports to get those minerals and the whole value chain from minerals right through batteries and electric engines. And to do this, we need big investments. We need a Canada Climate Bank. That's what the NDP would bring in. That would bring in funding for huge projects like these interties. They cost $2 billion each to put an intertie in between provinces. We should have crown corporations organizing major efforts around these things. And we are also promoting a civilian climate corps so that people can get involved and work to fight climate change across Canada.
All right, thank you, Richard. Tara.
Thank you. And yes, I do want to highlight that the question was about how do we accelerate the reduction of emissions. I did outline a number of steps when I began, but it is really important to note that our emissions have actually gone up 21% since 1990. So clearly what's being done, we're not doing it right. And so when we talk about the future and steps, we have to start electing voices that can start standing up for climate discussions. And that includes saying things like, we have to ban fracking. Fracking contributes to LNG. LNG is not a renewable source and it's not healthy. We have to stop subsidizing fossil fuel industry. $18 billion, 18 billion, that's with a B, is what we're subsidizing that. We could shift all of that into the renewable energy sector. And when we talk about renewable energies, we have to look at conservation and how can we reduce our consumption overall. We have to also support our local communities in addressing this, since ultimately it all gets downgraded onto our municipalities or even our own households to address things like increasing solar panels on our house or investing in insulation in the house. And we can help municipalities by giving them more autonomy and independence through city charters. And this way we can create locally developed solutions to actually address prime needs in the community. Second big piece, one of our second emitter in Canada is all about transportation. And so yes, investing in EVs is really, really important, and shifting things like Canada Post delivery vehicles all to EV. It's really important. But what I really want to talk about is how can we shift off car culture overall? And what are those impacts and how do all of those interconnect? We can, we had this, year and a half, 2 years that Helena mentioned about COVID, and that forced us to stay at home and prove that we could actually do work from home. So the question then is, why can't we continue on this trend? Even if it helps reduce car travel for commuting, a couple of days a week, that will significantly reduce our emissions. And thirdly, the third contributor to emissions in Canada is agriculture. And, we don't actually have any targets for agriculture. And I am a researcher, so I love my data. Our Green Party plan looks at reducing emissions 60% from 2005 levels. And one of those things we have to do is actually develop targets in our agricultural sector. And we need clear and enforceable goals with clear timelines so that we know that we're following them, because there's no point in having a plan without any actual targets. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Tara.
Okay, and now we're going to move on to our fourth question, which comes from Judy O'Leary from Citizens Climate Lobby West Kootenay. And for this question, the speaker order will be Ken, Richard, Tara, and Helena. And so Judy, please ask your question.
Thanks, Lynn. In the midst of the climate and biodiversity crisis, there's been a lot of discussion, but not really enough action. Can you tell us what you personally have accomplished, locally or nationally, to bring about the systemic as opposed to personal change that is needed to address the climate and biodiversity crises? How have your efforts resulted in implementation of solutions, not just talking about them? Thank you.
All right, Ken, you may start.
Yes, well, thank you for your question. I do appreciate it. And the one thing in my experience that I have is that I'm a father of 2 that are autistic. And the thing that I became a local advocate, and that's what it really grassroots in a sense when it comes down to is grassroots, is that I saw that it's not just the recommendations that come out of it, but implementation is key because you set the terms to those. And that's the experience that I would bring to the table when it comes to climate change. I mean, I was at a young age with my grandmother protesting against sun peaks and the development there, where she was showing me the way of that we need to preserve and conserve our watershed. And that's the biodiversity that I stood on the line for when it came to it, because she was not only teaching me, she was showing me this is the way. So, I mean, it was instilled to me as a younger age, but as I grow older, it's not just about making policies, it's about setting the terms to those policies. And, the aggressive stance that I see with, we all have a role to play when it comes to reducing our emissions and emitters, and we as a Liberal government, put a price on pollution, and that it's incremental, not just that $50 will be permanently, for instance, on other platforms. But I really want you to look at fully costed plan that actually has deliverables in the short term and long term. And that's what it's about. It's about how much it's going to cost you. They have great talking points here, but there is real action here now. And that's why we present it to you as a voter, that it's not just about talking points, it's about the details. It's about the comprehensive details to that plan and being costed and vetted. So I just want to thank you for that, because that's what I would bring, is about not just my experience about setting those recommendations, but setting those terms. Not one person can do it alone. We have to do this together. And that's why I'm willing to work across the party lines within my own caucus and party to bring that to life. So thank you again.
All right, thank you, Ken. All right, Richard, you may now have the floor.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Judy, for that important question. I can say that, working for the environment, working for climate action has really, been the story of my life. I grew up in a family that was dedicated to those ideals, and I became a biologist. I had a full career as a biologist before I got into politics. I wrote over a dozen books on the environment and nature, especially in British Columbia. My last, the third edition of my book on British Columbia natural history had a special emphasis on climate change and what it really means to our environment. I was a co-chair of the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada for 8 years. And when I became an MP, my first my first private member's bill was to fill a huge loophole in the Species at Risk Act that the Conservative government had been using to simply do nothing for species at risk in Canada, and that was adopted as policy and in the government. So right now, that loophole doesn't exist. So I've managed to do that. I have another private member's bill to use the best available materials when building federal infrastructure, materials that would have the lowest greenhouse gas footprint. That bill passed through the House of Commons. It was defeated by Conservative senators in the Senate, but it was started again in the Senate in this last Parliament, but we had an election that nobody wanted. And so that bill has been sidelined once again, and I'll bring it back. But I will keep doing these things as long as I'm breathing. So this has been my life, and I've really think it's important to have those voices, that experience in Ottawa, where we can really affect the laws that affect Canadians, affect our environment and biodiversity. So thank you for that really important question.
Thanks, Judy, and thanks, Citizens Climate Lobby, for this question. We all have different pathways about why we are interested in climate change or protecting biodiversity. And for me, it was actually through outdoor recreation. And it's through my love of skiing and hiking and biking that I really came to realize that, if we don't start protecting things, we're going to lose them. And so locally, what I've done a number of different things. So locally, I was one of the founding members of the Rosslyn Society for Environmental Action. One of the first projects that went through that was to protect and redevelop a wetland. And I'm really happy to say that wetlands protection and conservation project is still ongoing. I think might be in phase 3 right now. I'm not 100% sure, but it's been going really, really well. I've also been the chair of the Rosslyn Sustainability Commission, which is focused on economic and environmental health, and really just ensuring that the city of Rosslyn and the municipality have some good insight on what are some measures that can be taken. The other thing that I have done locally is that I am on the Rossland's official community plan advisory committee. And so here I'm having a direct impact on what the future of Rossland is going to look like in the next 10 and 15 years. And I am actually on there as both a social gender specialist and as well as the environmental lens perspective. I'm really also, as a result of this campaign in 2019, I was introduced to the Citizens Climate Lobby crew. And so I got to know them. I was really interested and I joined. And it was through them that we ended up forming a bit of a shoot-off group. And so a group of us went together and we said, you know what, Citizens Climate Lobby is wonderful, but I think we can do some additional measures. And we formed the BC, the British Columbia Climate Alliance. And here it's all about working with provincial government. And so I'm really happy to say that we've had a number of meetings with ministers and elected officials. And even though I am the Green Party candidate, most people do know that by now, and they're very happy and still willing to meet with me. And so that is just, again, demonstrative of my ability to work with other people to ensure that policies are being pushed forward. And then lastly, in my professional life, I am a researcher, like I said, and so I have done a number of pieces of research lately on both housing. And so when we talk about the need to upgrade insulation and renewable energies and housing, I really do understand that, as well as active transportation. Active transportation, we've had direct impacts, and I was a contributor on the National Active Transportation Strategy, as well as, once again, having provincial ministerial input. And with housing, I have been able to share both, well, actually the housing and active transportation research with the Green Party caucus. And so we have been pushing policies that way. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tara. And Helena.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Richard when he says we've been kicking this can down the road too long. For the past 6 years, we've been kicking this can down the road and nothing seems to be happening. And now's the time that we need change. For myself locally, how have I made change locally? I'm the only person running for member of parliament that has worked as a city councillor or in local government. And I recommend all the young people who are watching this to actually run for their local government in their next election. It's in a year. And I'm telling you, if you think you can, if you want to make change, that is where you can make it. And we need young people on councils around Canada, around BC, and in South Okanagan, West Kootenay. So I really recommend it. While I was on council, we made lots of really positive changes, including we enhanced our recycling program. We installed LED low emission street lights throughout Penticton and in our major buildings like the South Okanagan Event Center. We created a new community plan. We started it. It was finally approved in 2019, but we went through that process, which again created huge changes in our community and also with environmental policies. We followed something called the Climate Action Incentive Program from the province, which incentivize municipal governments to make changes that are environmentally friendly within their community. And it's really good incentive. So we retrofitted buildings. We gave our citizens an opportunity to retrofit their buildings and gave them some incentive to do that. We increased parkland acquisition with Campbell Mountain lands. And we also added to our public transit, which to me is extremely important when talking about the environment. But we also I'm also on the regional district here, and we started the South Okanagan Conservation Fund while I was on the regional district. And that was the group of areas that got together in municipalities that work on environmental, wildlife, land, and habitat conservation efforts. So again, run for city council. I highly recommend it.
Thank you, Helena. And Katya, you can take us into the next question.
All
Thanks.
right. So our next question is going to come from Rosalind Warner from the Global Empowerment Coalition of the Central Okanagan. And the speaker order for this question is going to go Richard, Tara, Helena, and Ken. So Rosalind, please go ahead with your question.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you to the organizers for the opportunity. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals are the world's guidebook to address the most pressing environmental, social, economic, and security challenges by 2030. With broad public and government support worldwide and in Canada, the framework of 169 associated targets and more than 230 indicators form Agenda 2030, a program of action for a whole of society approach to sustainable development that leaves no one behind. The goals are universal, they're integrated, they're aspirational, and they're transformative, and they acknowledge the need to move beyond business as usual. What would your government do, if elected, to help communities adopt the SDGs and work toward an approach that leaves no one behind?
All right, thank you for that question. Richard, if you could please start us off.
Well, thank you, Rosalind, for that great question as well. You know, when the Sustainable Development Goals, I kind of think of them as the DNA of the NDP. You know, when you go through each of the 17, whether it's ending poverty, ending hunger, empowering women, these are things that have been at the core of the NDP policies since it began. And also at the core of it is the fact that we have to work together, not just here locally, not just here in Canada, but around the world when we're tackling biodiversity issues or the climate crisis. We're all in the same storm together. We may be in different boats, but so Canada has to really up its game in terms of increasing foreign aid funding. We spend about half, I think, of what most of the other wealthy countries of the world do. And a little goes such a long way when you go to some of these other countries. I had the great opportunity to visit Canadian development projects in Samoa a couple of years ago. They were all about empowering local women. You know, one project cost $40,000 and was working to help local women. Other one, maybe 50,000 here, 100,000 there at most. Climate adaptation, dealing with issues that Samoa is facing around rising water levels, increased storms, plastic pollution covering their beaches. And as I say, just a little amount there meant so much to them that Canada was helping them with these goals. When one of them, I think one of the goals is around peace and justice, strong institutions. I'm a member of what's called Parliamericas. It's a group of parliamentarians from the Latin America, the Caribbean, and Canada. And we discuss things, the main topics we discuss are climate action, empowering women. Those issues are so important, and Canada can play a really strong role in the world. The Mining Association of Canada has a program that uses these goals for their members. We have to make that law, and we have to make the ombudsman that covers corporate responsibility have some real teeth in Canada. So I could go on, but that's it.
All right. Thank you, Richard, and thank you for sticking to the time. I know it's brief. Tara, you're up next.
You know, this is such a big question, Rosalind. I do appreciate it. And my heart goes out to everyone here who has to answer any of these questions first. For those who have never done this, it's really hard. And I promise you, as we go along, Richard's going to come with a whole bunch of other ideas. And Helena's comment on running for municipal office is, I encourage everybody here to consider getting into elected positions at some point. But back to the Sustainable Development Goals, it's actually interesting. Our 2019 platform, the Green Party platform, was actually aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. So every part of our section had, addressing poverty or addressing equity. And so it was every single piece of our platform was intended to actually address those things. And, we have released a new platform. Unfortunately, in the last 2 years, not too much has changed on that front. And so there are some really great ideas and indicators in our 2019 platform that would absolutely align with what you are looking for, Rosalind. A bit about me, I actually just finished a master's in global change and equity studies. And so when we talk about impacts of international communities and Canada's responsibility, I really do understand what that means. We have to look at, increasing our investments in the global south, understanding the impacts on climate refugees, and understanding that and it's in Canada, it's international, the impacts on Indigenous persons and on women, on those with a disability, on what climate impacts are going to have on these communities through devastating floods and fires. The Green Party is talking about ramping up the climate finance to up to $4 billion per year in order to specifically support climate mitigation and adaptation processes. We also, I commented a bit earlier about municipality roles, and we once again have to go back to supporting our local communities and addressing that. We really should be taking care of people in our own backyard. There's too many people that have gone unheard, and we can really see the impacts of the heat dome in that, and it was our vulnerable populations that were hurt. It wasn't the people that had the ability to go into air condition. And so when you take that example and apply it internationally, Canada used to be a leader in climate, and I think we can get back there, but we have to reinvest and we have to commit. And that includes addressing the corporate influence and the lobbying that is occurring and whispering in our politicians' ears at the moment. And I could go on too, but I'll stop.
All right, thank you, Tara. And we're gonna go over to Helena now.
Yeah, so we definitely need to help those in other countries, but we have a lot of issues locally here that have not been addressed and that a lot of people are suffering. Yes, it can be accentuated by things like the heat dome. We've got a lot of homeless people throughout our riding. And anyone who's been in Penticton lately, Grand Forks Trail, you're seeing people walking around who are homeless, or their homes are in jeopardy, or they are on drugs. And this needs to be addressed immediately and has been ignored by our current member of parliament. We have the highest opioid overdoses in Penticton. And again, that could be accentuated also by the environmental factors. And but we have the highest opioid deaths in Canada, in BC, in Penticton. We have one of the highest rates of homelessness, and we have a severe mental health issues here. Crime is just out of control. It's very difficult. I know women who are trying to start businesses, single women trying to start a business, trying to get up on their feet, and their windows of their businesses there's a brick through them every other week. That they can't afford to stay open because of the crime and because of the crime levels here. We don't have enough RCMP, and we can't. And the criminals who are, it's a typical. Typically, it's a revolving door of the same type of criminals that we can't seem to get help for. A lot of them need help because they're on drugs. We have to keep them, the people that live in our communities, safe from these people. And a lot of them have mental health issues. So we need to focus on those issues here so that we can reach out and help people in other countries. But I'm telling you, if these issues are not solved within our community, they are growing fast. And that's what I plan to focus on when I'm a member of parliament.
All right, thank you, Helena. Ken, your response to Rosalind, please.
Yes, thank you, Rosalind, for your question. I just want to get this out of the way, first of all. I am the only visible minority candidate, and I want to say that, I know about social economic issues when it comes here to Canada, for instance. I've lived on a reservation for many years, grew up with my grandmother there. And, those types of impacts that I saw, for instance, my twin brother, got cancer when we were 6 years old. We had to leave our reserves to access those healthcare needs. But, in a snapshot, I just want to talk about some of what we have done here locally and abroad. And, you know, from missing and murdered Indigenous women to the TRC. These are the things that we have to focus on locally and abroad here in Canada, so that the healing journey begins and doesn't end, because that journey always continues side by side. And those are the things that I look at when if we want to, you know, not just go globally with that, but show that we can reconcile our differences when it comes to these issues, especially with vulnerable women, which are Indigenous women. So I just want to really look at that as obviously one of my priorities. Is we've had completed or up to 80 of the calls to actions right now for the TRC. Missing and murdered, we brought the inquiry forth, which was one of the biggest inquiries as well as TRC. It's to show the rest of the world that we can do better and that we have to do it together. But also at the same time, investing in those countries that are abroad that have challenges just as we do here, but more so over there. But at the end of the day, we have to show the world, first of all, here, not just as Canadians, but Indigenous, walking side by side when it comes to these issues, that we are no more or less than of those who are, you know, have more fortunate roads. They didn't have to grow up under the Indian Act. You know, those are the things I look at. So I want to say thank you for the question.
All right, thank you, Ken. And then I'm going to pass it back to Lynn for our next question.
All right, thank you. So our sixth question comes from Jamie Hunter with Extinction Rebellion West Kootenay. The speaker order for this question will be Tara, then Helena, then Ken, and then Richard. So Jamie, please ask your question.
Thank you, Lynn. So old growth logging has become a huge topic in BC and around Canada in the past few months, particularly in light of the Fairy Creek blockades. Right now at Fairy Creek, RCMP are behaving in a violent and highly unprofessional manner towards peaceful protesters, while BC politicians claim that the actions of the RCMP fall under federal and not provincial jurisdiction. And so with that information, what would you do to ensure that old growth forest is protected in Canada and that a situation with RCMP behaving this violently does not happen again?
All right, thank you, Jamie. Tara, you can answer the question first.
My finger kept pressing it. So it's a two-part question. What can we do to ensure old growth? And the second part was, how do we, could you repeat that, Jamie, the second part of that question? Preventing the RCMP violence?
Yeah, and what can we do to ensure a situation that RCMP do not behave that violently in the future?
Thank you. So the first part to the question, ensuring old growth, well, we need an immediate moratorium on old growth logging. That is definitely the very first step that should be done. Old growth is a fire suppressant, it's a carbon sink. We need to just stop doing that. That is also tied in with just reevaluating our entire resource extraction project process. This includes the recognizing it is provincial jurisdiction, but there are federal avenues that we could be taking. And the first step is, once again, to just be reviewing what does the provincial assessment process look like and what does the federal assessment process look like? And how are we actually managing the forests? We don't have a national forest strategy right now. The Green Party has been asking for a national forest strategy in their platform for a while. And so let's start also with that. So let's end old growth and then take a look at what resources exist and how we could be best doing that. And again, forestry, when we look at old growth, when we look at forestry in general, it's not just provincial. We have to recognize that there's international trade agreements that are involved in this, that are driving the cost and interest in raw lumber, and it goes down all the way into our local communities. We need to be supporting Indigenous-led conservation areas and Indigenous and autonomies and agencies for managing resources as well. But again, it just kind of goes back with the immediate halting of old growth. The second part to your question, preventing RCMP violence. The Green Party was the first party to condemn the violence that was happening, and I'm happy to stand behind that. What occurred to protesters is not acceptable, and we can't be allowing peaceful protests to be to get out of hand by people who are supposed to be protecting us. And this is a really great example of how the RCMP and the formation of the RCMP was to protect wealthy landowners, quite frankly, wealthy white male landowners. So we have to reevaluate that. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I actually wanted to be RCMP when I was younger. I have a police foundations diploma and a criminal justice undergrad. My brother is also in the RCMP, and so I know what depot training looks like, and it does not include cultural training. So there's systemic racism that we actually have to address in there, and that starts with training our new recruits at depot and doing some really basic cultural training at least, but right now there is absolutely none. So that is my time, but those are my answers. Thanks, Jamie.
All right, thank you, Tara. And next, Helena, you can answer the question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. We know that there's about 10 million old growth forests in BC that have been set aside, and there's a little over 3 million that now is basically being under negotiation. And I think that this is where there needs to be all levels of government and Indigenous working together to make sure that the proper decisions are made about what to do with that old growth. The RCMP right now in Canada are under an incredible amount of pressure. They are not recruiting enough RCMP. Everywhere in every single community that is calling in today, you have a shortage of RCMP, and we need to do something about that. We need to. I would say at any time in Penticton, when I was on city council, sometimes up to 20% of the RCMP would be on leave, and so we would always be short. Right now, RCMP is the most expensive thing for local government to have to pay for, and yet pressures to have RCMP is increasing, especially in rural areas. In rural areas, RCMP are predominantly paid for by the province, and the province has not increased the level of provincial RCMP in over a decade. The pressures are rising on the people that are working as RCMPs, and also those that are they're trying to recruit. So I see this from different levels. We need to make sure that we increase the level of RCMP, and what do we do to attract more people and more diverse people to the RCMP force? That is something we need to focus on right away, because we can't not have this shortage, and this is where trouble happens. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Helena. And Ken, you can respond to the two-pronged question now. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jamie, for the question. As I mentioned before, we would set a moratorium on 250 years or older, for instance, and that would be within the first 100 days. I would very much so put that on the table in regards to it, but also that, as a Indigenous person, I'm going to tell you, I was on a front line protesting with my grandmother about development in regards to extraction for the resources and putting a city in Sun Peaks, for instance. So I do know about militarism, but I want to go back to a bit about the history. The RCMP have been an extended arm and have been in regards to residential schools. So they have played an intricate role when it comes to Indigenous relations and crown relations, for instance. And, you know, some of the suggestions that I came up with my local MP at the time is that some of the things I want to work on, for instance, and set recommendations panel is having a civilian oversight, and that would actually have teeth to that, where they would investigate and charge either RCMP or local provincial police in regards to this, to hold them accountable to, as we are accountable to the law. And these are the things that need to be sorted out, though, as we look at the things that we need to start thinking outside of the box for these things. But at the same time, I've been on the front line. I've seen them in action, you know, and it's not a nice sight either, obviously, because of what we believe in peaceful protests. And I do believe in peaceful protests because I have done peaceful protesting and seen what they do to people who are, for instance, trying to save what they love, for instance, and that's the land, the trees, and the people that the land and trees and support us. So I just want to make it clear that I have sat on that front line to protect and protest against development or extraction of our precious resources. Because at the end of the day, that's all that will remain once we are gone. And that's what I want my future, you know, generations of my kids to see, that Dad did something. And I did do something because of my grandmother saying so, that this is the way. So thank you for your question.
All right. Thank you, Ken. And Richard.
Well, thank you, Jamie, for this question. And I think I'll start with the RCMP and finish with the old growth biodiversity part. The NDP caucus has written the Minister of Public Safety and demanded an independent inquiry into the behavior and actions of the RCMP at Fairy Creek, because they are completely over the top. They're there at the behest of the forest companies and have been acting in such a manner that is just completely unacceptable. So we have demanded an inquiry into this to see what, you know, why this is happening and how, you know, it must stop. And to move to the old growth logging, you know, I've been, again, writing about this for many years. I know very well what the biodiversity, what the climate, all, you know, what old growth forests mean for that. I see not just on the big, classic, iconic old growth forests of the coast, but here in the interior, as clear cuts increase, you know, the diversity of our forests here in the southern interior are decreasing. And so I've written about this in my books and blogs. You can check that out. We have to value forests for more than fiber. And one of the last meetings I went to, face-to-face meetings before COVID hit, was a forestry summit at UBC, where people from the environmental community, the industry, government came together and had a real good open strategy session. And the upshot of that was that forests for the future must, as I say, value things like the carbon sequestration, biodiversity, water, recreation, all those things. That's how we have to move to a new forestry of the future. And the federal government can play a role here by, you know, compensating the forest companies for going back on the contracts, the long-term contracts they have in forest tenure. And that's how we can put a moratorium on. Otherwise, it just won't work. The federal government has to step up with that funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And now we'll go to Katya for our next question.
All right. Thank you. Our seventh question is going to come from Jenny Barron from the Mir Center for Peace at Selkirk College. And our speaker order is Helena, Ken, Richard, and Tara. So Jenny, please go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Katya and Lynn and all the other organizers and all the candidates. So my question, as you may know, militaries around the world, including the Canadian military, are significant contributors to climate change. What I'd like to know is what your thoughts are on the following. First of all, ending the exemption of the Department of National Defense from government reduction targets for greenhouse gas emissions. And secondly, placing a moratorium on purchasing new fighter jets and taking the $19 billion or 77 billion over the life cycle that's been set aside to purchase these jets and redesignating it to a just transition, enabling a just transition away from fossil fuels. And for anyone who's not familiar with that term, a just transition is one that includes everyone, with particular attention to workers, people with low and precarious income, and others who are especially vulnerable to both environmental disasters and economic shifts. So again, ending the exemption of the Department of National Defense from greenhouse gas reduction targets and reassigning that $19 billion to a just transition. Thanks.
All right, thank you for your question, Jenny. And Helena, you could please start us off.
That's a great question. I really didn't think you were going to ask me that. I didn't know a lot about that, and thanks for letting me know. I do know that I support our veterans, and I could never answer your question really honestly or fully right now, because the most important thing for me is that they are safe wherever they are. And if I were to tell you right now, okay, that our veterans should, or our military should be exempt from the targets, there's a possibility that they could be put in jeopardy somewhere in the world, and I would never do that. So I would have to look into that, and I'm sure that has been looked into by the governments in the past and future. So we need to have obviously have a committee, if it isn't already, looking into that. But I would never put our veterans in jeopardy. The other thing is that about the military jets is that, again, I don't know enough about that particular issue, but I would never want to, or how much do you want to depend on other countries to defend us? And who will you be depending on? This is this world is becoming more and more volatile, and we do have to have some sort of military presence. So again, a committee put together to look in to make sure that we are all kept safe and that our veterans are kept safe. That would be the number one thing I would do in response to your questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Helena. Next, we're going to go to Ken.
Yes, thank you for your question. I mean, this is obviously, hits home, obviously, because one thing I'll start off with saying is that we do have NATO commitments that we are part of when it comes to the defense of this country and other countries abroad that we've been since World War II. And that I will look at the procurement processing, because I'll tell you one thing is that when the Liberal government came in, it was the F-35 program, if you remember that one, where we're stuck in a long-term deal with that had technical difficulties, revamps all the time. And these were the issues of why we weren't getting the jets, for instance, to secure our defenses. And I do understand your question when it comes to it, because I would look at that and try and not only, but look and get recommendations from a broad of experts like yourself who are interested in regards to these issues, because we have to also make sure that we still stand by our commitments with NATO, for instance, because there are ever growing pressures from global other countries. And we have to ensure that we keep to our commitments about NATO. But to answer, the wasteful money has already been there, for instance, and we had to make a short-term commitment to those with the purchase of the F-18 Hornets from Australia, for instance. So I do understand your passion about this, and we have to look at it. And I think back to the Aero program. We can have the innovation here. It's just how do we go about it? And we have to come together when it comes to these issues. So I just want to thank you for your question again, and that we do have to understand that we have to have a real defense system. And when we came into power, the planes were just not ready. They were not even airborne yet. For instance, they're still on the ground. But again, we had to make short-term investments so that we commit to our NATO commitments. So at the end of the day, we do have to ensure your safety and security here and abroad when it comes to those, to our allies especially as well. But I sure damn well would like to see innovation come to those terms when it comes to defense capabilities as well, because that's what you're really getting down to, is that more of a greener defense capabilities. And I totally agree. So thank you for the question.
All right, thank you, Ken. And over to Richard.
Well, thank you for that question, Jenny. And I just want to say what a treasure the Mir Center is to this area. Not too many people know about it, but the work that goes on at the Mir Center, the education about nonviolent peacekeeping around the world, that to me is something that Canada should really treasure. In terms of the military and the carbon footprint of the military, the NDP has long stood stead for making sure that all polluters pay. As regards to the jets, we would agree with the Green Party that the F-35 program is something that should be abandoned, and that we need aircraft for our Air Force that can operate in our Arctic areas, for instance. But we really have to look at what missions that we want the armed forces to carry out. And as Helena says, we need to make sure when we put our armed forces into missions, wherever they are, they have to be safe. They have to have the right equipment. We don't want them, it's enough for them to put their lives on the line, but they have to have safe equipment. And just to touch on the $19 billion for the just transition, we have another source of $19 billion. We have a pipeline that we bought and we built, or we're building, that's going to cost about that. That's money that should be spent on the climate action front, and especially on the just transition. I've spoken to oil and gas workers through Iron and Earth who want to transition. They want the training that is needed. They have a $10 billion program over a number of years that would give those workers good jobs across the country, that right now they're feeling very anxious. They're feeling worried because they see reports around the world that the oil and gas sector is losing investments, projects aren't moving ahead. They want to move out into renewable energy, into construction jobs across the country, and we need to fund that education. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Richard. And over to Tara.
Thanks. What a curveball in questions, Jenny. Thank you. Keeping us all on our toes this evening. International defense. So the answers to your question is yes and yes. I would agree. I wasn't aware that the military was exempt from targets. And as I mentioned earlier, we need targets. If we don't have targets, then how can we actually reach anything? So I'm in full support of identifying those targets and figuring out what those are. And then as for the fighter jets, $19 billion, that's, if I recall, those were also to hold nuclear weapons as well and to be nuclearized. So I don't agree with investing in more nuclear weapons. And I love that Ken brought up the F-35s. That was quite a corporate scandal that was, and corruption that was occurring. There was some massive corporate interests in there, and it really speaks to the overall corporate interests over ethical actions when we look at international defense and international participation. We actually just need to go back and reassess our entire commitments and membership with both NATO and NORAD, for that matter. We need to be focusing on, disaster relief. We need to be and redeploy our military and our armed forces into current and modern day issues. Cyber defense is a bigger threat to us, and local, white supremacy is a bigger threat to us over things like international warfare and on our borders. We need to reinforce Canada's Arctic sovereignty and really, once again, get ready for the inevitable climate changes that are occurring. The other piece I wanted to mention here, it sounds like I've got a bit of time, is, the just transition is so important, and $19 billion would go such a long way in reevaluating that. And it just goes to speak that we always have money. We have monies for pipelines, we have money for national defense and fighter jets, but for some reason we can't find the money to actually invest in our local communities and our households, in municipal infrastructure. I do question the NDP's promise to end TMX. Once again, I believe, Richard, I believe Mr. Cannings, that you are really committed to that. But just a week and a half ago, Mr. Singh said, I'm going to have to review the project before I can commit to canceling. And this just harkens back to Premier Horgan and Site C. And I just feel that we're going to be going down that same line. There are so many great, amazing job opportunities in the new economy. So let's do that shift. Thank you, Jenny.
All right, thank you so much. And then we are going to go back to Lynn for our last question.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna wind it up with our last, but certainly not least question, which will be coming from Marina from Fridays for Future West Kootenay. So the speaker order for that is going to be Ken, then Richard, then Tara, then Helena. All right, take it away, Marina.
Thank you so much. So in June 2021, the Stop Ecocide Foundation released a draft definition of ecocide. This definition is as follows. Ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts. Put simply, ecocide is essentially the mass destruction of the environment. We believe that an international law of ecocide is needed to stop the ongoing destruction of our environment, both in Canada and internationally. What are your thoughts on making ecocide a crime at the International Criminal Court?
All right. So Ken, you may respond first.
Well, thank you for the question. I'm a firm believer that, we all have to be accountable to our actions. And those are the things that we are very responsible for, to legislate those actions as well when it comes to real teeth. But also being a global partnership with the rest of the world and our allies when it comes to these. And to answer your question is that, yes, it is crimes against humanity. As an Indigenous person, I know what it feels like. I care for Mother Earth because of what has happened throughout over 150 years of colonization. But at the same time, we all have a role to play in that. For instance, banning thermal coal. That's one of the things I look at, that we have to really understand that we're the only party presenting that with real cost to that. That's been vetted. So, at the end of the day, I know that we have a plan that is more than substantial when it comes to dealing with climate change and with recognizing that we can no longer do what we're doing to Mother Earth. We have to start thinking and transforming and transcending our economy so that we don't have to keep doing with a resource economy based. And the only plan that's out there that's been fully costed is the Liberal plan. I see that, some of my counterparts are on the fence when it came to TMX. Well, at the same time, we are going to phase out fossil fuel subsidies. We want to ensure that Crown corporations, going back to talking about fighter jets, for instance, we were phasing them out in all Crown corporations as well. So it's not just certain departments, it's all departments, so that we start to diversify our economy and transforming it. So yes, I mean, I would obviously look at that because we need more information at it, because as a whole country, we have to come to an agreement about it, because that's what consensus is about. It's not about one person saying this or another person. It's about all of us coming together and working out the details when it comes to these hard issues at hand. And I love Mother Earth. And, you know, our house is on fire. That's the way I look at it. That's why I got into politics, to make change. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ken. And Richard, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question. And I would echo what Ken said in terms of, you know, the global situation of biodiversity loss, of extinction crisis that we are in. You know, we are causing a great extinction around the world. We have to stop this, you know, along with climate change. There are so many pressures that are affecting our biodiversity around the world. And whether, you know, bringing this into international law is the most, you know, we have to fix this quickly. And sometimes international law is rather cumbersome. And I'm not sure if it's the best way to go, but I am very, very much behind any efforts to stop the loss of biodiversity, the loss of natural spaces around the world. Again, as I said, this has been my life. And I just want to emphasize that. And as I say, the NDP is very much, that is at the core of our environmental policy as well. And just to, again, I guess being the front runner, I'm just in this supposedly happy debate, I'm taking a lot of shots here. I just want to mention to Tara that the NDP position on TMX has been always, we are opposed to it. We are opposed to it, and we will always be opposed to it. All the reports coming out from the International Energy Agency, from the Canada Energy Regulator, these are normally big cheerleaders for the oil and gas sector. They all say we do not need this pipeline. So why are we spending all this money on it? I believe I think Jagmeet was talking about what we would do with the asset if we form government, because if we stop building it, we would still own it, unfortunately. So we'd have to find a way to get rid of it. But we don't need that pipeline, and we are opposed to it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Richard. And Tara, you can answer the question now.
Thank you. Accountability in our elected officials is really important. So I'm sorry if you feel like I'm taking shots, Mr. Cannings. I am just trying to get some clarity. But as to the question on Ecocide, I fully support this, turning this into an international law. I was actually at the June 2021 presentation when Ecocide presented this definition. I am fully in support. Green Party has been in support for some time. Elizabeth May, I'm sure many of you know, is very much in support of this. And what this law really does is it really holds the top decision makers accountable and I really loved in the session, Jonas Roop really summed it up quite nicely. You know, he says, if you run a good business with good practices, as a CEO, you can sleep well at night. If you run a bad business with bad practices, it's time to wake up and get your stuff in order. And I think that's a really great message to be sending out, because again, we're not going after individual workers. This Ecocide law isn't intended to go after workers. We need to continue to support the jobs in these industries for the individual employees. It's going after the massive decision makers, and that includes government, that includes the corporate holdings. And it really does speak to also the need to address, at least in Canada, the massive lobbying loopholes that exist. You know, we've got really lax lobbying, and you can really go from industry to lobbyist and government seats so easily. You can be whispering in those ears so simply, and we just don't have the same resources. Ecocide does not have the same resources that massive industry does. And so we have to start closing these and truly addressing them at the root cause, which is telling corporations that you're going to pay. It's time for you to get on board. It also perhaps speaks to the need to address corporate laws in general, and the fact that they're treated as individuals, but their purpose is profit. And so that doesn't put people at the center of the decision-making process, which is what we have to get our entire system back into. It's about creating people-focused decisions. I'm going to stop. I won't talk anymore.
All right. Thank you, Tara. I guess we can pass it on to Helena now. You have the floor.
Thank you for that question. I have to tell you that I hate that word, ecocide. It's terrible. We're a sovereign country, and we don't want any other judicial system to tell us what is right or wrong. We're Canada. We are a great country, and we don't need another jurisdiction to tell us what is right or wrong. Now, I believe that Canadians are trying their best, and when it has to do with the environment, they really are. But we can always do better. But let's not scare our children with words like ecocide. We've been through so much lately. We need to show a little compassion for people who are really trying their best. They're recycling, they're trying to drive their car less. Everybody I know, and I don't know everyone, of course, but they're trying to do their best, and they're continually told that they're screwing up. And so I think what we need to be is a little more positive, use less of the stick and more of the carrot. Let's not make our children scared. Let's work together as Canadians, like we always have. And I want you to look at the Conservative plan. I think I really believe it's a solid plan, but it also takes into account that we can't be cutting jobs right now. We have lost so many jobs in the last little while in that field already. And I don't know if many of you know this, thousands of people in this riding work in the oil and gas field. So many families depend on one of their members flying up to the oil patch and working and coming back. Now, many of them have lost their jobs already, but we can't be cutting we have to be able to allow these people to continue to put food on their family's table. We need to have a transition into cleaner energy. We need to work towards that. The Conservative plan does work towards that, but let's have some compassion in a time it's a very difficult time for Canadians and for the world right now.
All right. Thank you, Helena. All right, so now that we've finished up our questions, we will move on to our final remarks. So we are giving candidates 1 minute for a closing statement. We are switching the speaker order once again based on a second random number generator. So we'll call on candidates in this order. It'll be Richard, then Ken, then Helena, then Tara. Okay, Richard, you are invited to start your closing comments.
Well, thank you, Lynn. And I hope everyone here has really enjoyed this forum. I know I have. And as I said before, I got into politics because I wanted to be that voice of science and reason in Ottawa. And I've worked collegially with other MPs from every party to get the work done. And that's what most Canadians expect of their representatives. I have worked locally through I started the Meadowlark Festival. I was one of the founders of First Things First, the climate action in the Okanagan. But I'm running again because I feel there's more I can do. There's more I must do. All Canadians benefit when more NDP MPs are elected. And I hope I will be once again one of those NDP MPs working for you in Ottawa, creating a better Canada for everyone. And as Jack Layton said, don't let them tell you it can't be done.
All right. Thank you, Richard. I see that Tara is waving. Is there a problem?
I just wanted to confirm, I understood we had 2 minutes for this and for the closing statements. And so I feel like Richard was probably really rushed there because I think we all thought we had 2 minutes. So can you clarify the time, please?
Okay, let's see. I have it
2
written
minutes,
as
Lynn.
1 minute in our script document. What was it sent out as 2 minutes to everybody?
It was. Let's go ahead and do
Everyone
2
agrees
minutes.
on
Let's
that?
give
Okay,
let's give
2
Richard. Sorry
minutes
about
it'll
that.
be then. Richard, you can have another minute or two. And then everyone can have 2 minutes.
Okay, I will just start again. I just want to thank everybody again for tuning in, thank the organizers. And as I said, I got involved in politics a few years ago because I wanted to be that voice of science and reason in Ottawa. It was at a time in the Harper era when scientists were being muzzled. Science wasn't listened to. And over the past 6 years, I've worked collegially with MPs from every party to get the work done. And that's what most Canadians expect of their representatives. I've also worked locally. I was a founder of the Meadowlark Festival that celebrates the natural diversity and biodiversity of the South Okanagan. I was one of the founding members of First Things First, which has grown into a very effective climate action group in the South Okanagan. Tara mentioned that I think part of the BC Climate Alliance. And I'm running again because I feel there is more that I can do. There's more that I must do. And all Canadians benefit when more NDP MPs are elected. And I hope that I will be once again one of those NDP MPs working for you in Ottawa, creating a better Canada for everyone. That will always be our focus. And as Jack Layton said, don't let them tell you it can't be done.
All right, thank you, Richard. And I'm sorry to everyone that we goofed the times a bit, but I'm glad that it's all back on track. Ken, you have 2 minutes to close.
Yes, thank you. I just want to, go back, my bloodlines go back from time immemorial. We were stewards of the lands, protector of the lands. And this is why I'm stepping up, because my grandmother told me that someone has to do it. I didn't know at the time what she was telling me, but this is why you're going to vote for me, Ken Robertson, your Liberal candidate. I believe in climate change and global warming. And as an elected, we have a record in a fully costed, vetted plan endorsed by the Suzuki Foundation, Andrew Weaver, Mark Jacobor, and to transform our economy to a world-class green economy, banning thermal export coal by 2030. I, Ken Robertson, as your next elected MP, will help implement these policies in Ottawa, but also here in the South Okanagan, West Kootenay. Liberals have started a plan that is on the roadmap to make sure we do our part in the global economy. My grandmother's teaching of stepping up to be a land defender is and will always be a part of me. With your vote for Ken Robertson, we'll stand for you and future generations to come, for the people because of the people. Forward for everyone, for Mother Earth. The Liberal Party of Canada is the only choice to combat climate change now and in the future, cutting emissions by 40% by 2030. A carbon price tax plan to $170 a ton by 2030, to phasing out oil and gas subsidies from 2025 to 2023. Vote for Ken Robertson for Mother Earth, aka the environment. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ken. Now, Helena, you can deliver your closing remarks.
Thank you. This is a critical time in our history, and most of you know that. I believe the other parties are dividing Canadians, and this is the time when we actually need to come together and work together. I plan to work with all levels of government so we can actually get things done. It's been 6 years now that we've given our current MP a chance to do something. He is a very smart environmentalist, but he's never passed a bill through Parliament. He can't. He works for a fourth place party. He cannot get anything done. We've given him 6 years. Now we need to bring things to our riding that we haven't had before. You need to have a voice in Ottawa. The environment is important, but we also need to show compassion because, again, we're all doing our best. Most Canadians think they're trying their best. You can laugh, but they really think they're doing their best. And we can incentivize them to do more. We can incentivize them, we should. But let's all come together now. Let's work together and not be divisive. And I will tell you this, many of you don't know this, but I'm a professional tennis player, 7-time national champion in tennis in Canada. I have a lot of energy. This riding takes so much energy. And I get it. It's tough to get from community to community. And that's why they're not seeing their MP right now. But I will be in every community and I will be talking with all of you. And I need your voice. I need your information. You guys you know way more about this than I do. I can't wait to work for you. And I have the energy to do it. Thank you so much. And thank you again for putting together this amazing program tonight.
All right. Thank you, Helena. And last but not least, Tara, you may close.
Right. Thank you so much. And again, thank you everyone who has stayed online and watched this entire event. I get the Zoom fatigue and it's been an interesting format for me to do this. So thank you for the organizers for putting this on as well. We talked about it earlier, the IPCC has issued a code red for the climate. And the Green Party has always been at the leading edge of climate action. We've been pushing policies in Parliament. And in fact, all the other parties are now following our lead with climate actions. I mentioned earlier, climate justice and social justice are intertwined. And everything that we talk about, whether it's housing or jobs or disaster events, there's always going to be populations that are going to be impacted and affected more than others. And this is my strength. I understand what these impacts can mean, and I understand that for this riding. I'm the only candidate that knows what intersectionality means and lives in this area. And yes, of course, we've talked about Richard's environmental science. Yes, he is in environmental sciences, and we need science pushing policies based on best practices and research. But we also need MPs who are leaders in climate, social, and economic justice and able to focus on implementing good legislation. The Liberals, they'll sure tell you a really good game, but the reality is greenhouse gases have increased since they've been in power. Conservatives, there's a reason I haven't been taking too many shots at Helena tonight, Richard. It's the conservatives. If we elect conservatives, it's going to go backwards for climate. And quite frankly, the NDP has held the balance of powers for this last session, the last 2 years, and no real actions have been implemented. No principled stance has been taken. These are just examples of the 3 big political machines that exist right now, and their sole purpose is to maintain the power balance and the status quo. Greens, on the other hand, are here to work for you. I'm constitutionally bound to work for and speak for constituents and focus on being leaders in the House of Commons, not just a lapdog for a party leader. The opportunity is now. Elect Tara Howes, a Green MP, and the ability to work across party lines, because that's what Green parties do, constantly co-sponsoring other bills. And let's make climate a part of every single discussion.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your closing statements. And I just wanted to say I really appreciate the candidates from each and every party for showing up here tonight to talk about this important issue. We know that this is hard work, and we so appreciate you keeping our democracy strong and your participation in this forum. A big thanks to our timekeeper, Jay, and to all of those who helped put this event together from Fridays for Future and CCL. Thank you also to the organizations and individuals who stepped up to ask questions. So be sure to get out there and vote. Advanced polls are open September 10th to 13th, and voting day is the 20th. We're going to challenge you to help 5 other people to get out and vote this election. Before you leave us, we also ask that everyone take 30 seconds to participate in our exit poll. which should pop up in your Zoom window. Thank you for caring and for taking the time to be here tonight. And I wish everyone a good evening.
Good night.
Michael, I'm not getting that poll.
Yeah, so we have what we call a Kootenai technical glitch, where it is not working.
That's all right.
okay.
If things happen, we can just say thanks and good night.
Yeah, thank you everybody for all of your attention, and to the moderators and the candidates and timekeeper. Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.